City Council meeting. Blaine, would you lead us in prayer, please?
Yes. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for this day. Lord, thank you for waking us up, letting us see a day, Lord, we've never seen before. Lord, a day we'll never see again. Lord, we just ask that you guide us through this meeting, getting the things and the points that we have on the agenda. We ask that we do them decent and in order, and that when we finish this meeting, we will have accomplished that which we have come here to accomplish. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. If you'll stand for the pledges, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Is there anything in open forum? Okay, next item is open forum, and there being none. Items to be removed from the consent agenda, if any. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Make a motion, we approve the consent agenda.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Okay, now we'll go to the regular agenda. Consider the acceptance of the downtown project's implementation strategy final report from the Goodman Corporation. Mike New, Executive Director of Infrastructure and Development.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Mike New, Executive Director of Development and Infrastructure. I am here to introduce the Goodman Corporation, specifically Elizabeth Witten, the principal at Goodman Corporation, to present to you the final report of our downtown implementation strategy. If you'll recall, back in February of 2025 of this year, we contracted with Goodman to prepare a number of things in an effort to identify some really strategic actions to improve downtown, to diversify some of our economy in doing so, and do it in a way that does not burden the taxpayers with additional debt to our best ability. What Goodman will share with you is a culmination of some of their research, many of our discussions and feedback that we received not only from members of the public and certain stakeholders, but even our technical advisory committee, which you have appointed to provide input on. Their comments are included within this report, and Elizabeth will share some of the highlights of some of the strategic projects, but also the broader picture of where we go from here. What do we do next? How can we really move on some of the information that was collected as part of this report? So without further ado, I'll introduce Elizabeth Witten.
Good evening, and I am told you do not have the slides in front of you, but you do have the report. So there's information that's in the slides and the report, and I'll just give you some page numbers. There we go. Perfect. So I'm just going to start with a quick refresher of how we got here and what we're going to be presenting on. Majority is going to be discussing the projects, and specifically the 4 strategic projects. And like Mike said, where do we go from here? So just to give you a little bit of an update, like Mike said, in February, you authorized our task work order and you initiated the Downtown Technical Advisory Committee. And since then, we have been working on 5 tasks, just the general project management and coordination, a review of what had been done. We wanted to really make sure we were building and leveraging all of y'all's previous work. Looking at parking and parking facilities, talk about that in a second, and then look at the other 3 strategic projects, and then work on a couple of grant applications. We did a robust stakeholder engagement effort, so we did have our Technical Advisory Committee, which met 5 times throughout this effort. We did a public survey, which had about 700 responses. So about 2% of the community responded, so very happy with that. And it was a cross-section of the community as well. And then we had several stakeholder interviews. So when I last spoke to you guys back in June, my presentation was mostly focused on the parking, and talking about where we were with the parking facility, the demand for parking, and really the need now and what we projected in the future, as well as kicking off our public survey effort. So today I'm really focused on the recommendations. Let's start with the centralized parking facility, and if you look in the report, page 28 and 29 has a lot of the information that was on the slides. Excuse me. So let's start first with the project need. There is about 200 parking spaces needed in downtown to meet demand now and in the future as more and more development comes downtown. There is a need because of economic growth happening. We need more parking. It is very hard for a new business to locate in downtown because there is a lack of parking near their spaces. So it's like, okay, chicken or the egg. We need parking now, and so we've got recommendations to move forward with that. Our big recommendation is a 3-story parking garage. It'll have projected cost estimate of between 20 to 25 million, but I will walk through that. It is a very that is a very broad, sorry, something happened with the computer there, but that number has a lot of contingencies built in, and I can walk through that as needed. What we're proposing is the 3-story garage that'll have about 150 parking spaces per floor, plus 11,000 square feet of mixed-use space that would be fronting the street. So as we build out with our cost estimate, that includes building out each floor. That includes, it'll be a drilled pier structure, so it does not require any excavation. The fact that this isn't the floodplain makes this a very difficult site to build on, to use the whole site. So we're actually using all of the portions that are not within the floodplain. So fronting Pilar Street is really the key part. It includes mixed-use space that there's very little new mixed-use space in downtown. It's hard to do that. And so this would be an opportunity to have some new mixed-use space and really kind of put in what you would want there and customize that. We'd have green space on all of the where there's current asphalt. We would transform that into a green space around the 3-story structure. Well, for what you can see, but so how the 3 stories would work, you would have mixed-use space on the front and about 60 parking spaces on the first floor, and then the second and third floors would have about 150 spaces, maybe about 328 spots, which meets your demand now and in the future. So where are we right now? We're at 30% design. You're ready to go to start that final design phase. So once there is some funding in place, you can actually move forward and start that final design phase. But how do we get that funding? We have a couple of proposed funding sources, key being Economic Development Administration. So there's a couple of EDA Notice of Funding Opportunities open right now, which we'll talk about at, I think, the next item. So that is a potential opportunity. Congressional appropriations funding, community project funding is also a potential funding opportunity. Potentially the Federal Transit Administration, but that's a little less of a potential funding source, but it could be one depending on how some things play out. And then setting up that public-private partnership structure with local or private funding. What can you, how soon can you get this built? You can start the design phase now, and then move through design over about the next year, and then work on your procurement documents for construction. And construction, we think, would take about a year and a half to move forward. Any questions on parking facility? I've kind of done it at a high level. The information in pages 28 and 29 of the report has all of this plus some. It can really serve as like a one-pager for anyone that would like to look at the proposed project.
So I have some questions, but I'm thinking maybe we should hear the whole presentation and then come back to the questions on parking or whatever.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
So next project in your report is the Bonita Creek Promenade. And there, if you scroll to page 48 and 49 is all of the information that's also on the slides. So what we are proposing is a promenade along the north bank of Bonita Creek. This would run throughout downtown and potentially all the way over to the Dempsey Soccer Complex, depending on potential right-of-way availability. The cost would be about $4 million, but I'm gonna add some caution on that. That includes a lot of contingency, design funding. The trail and the associated landscaping with that is about half the cost of that. So this is very much an affordable project from a grant funding perspective and an implementable project. Then one thing that I want to highlight is when we did the public survey, residents specifically asked that, hey, we want more like walking and biking around downtown and connectivity to various locations. And this promenade, partnered with a couple of other projects, would create a lot of connectivity, and there's the potential for connectivity from the farmers market all the way through Festival Park to Bonita Creek, all the way to the Dempsey Soccer Complex. So what are we proposing here? 12-foot wide hike and bike trail, a lot of landscaping to make this really like a promenade feature. This would be in the floodplain, but we're proposing it on the back edge, so not front of the creek, but on the back of the property line. We've already had some informal conversations with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and they do not expect there to be an issue with this. And so we've prepared the paperwork to pursue a letter of no impact. So that is very good news. So informal conversations, but excited that the Corps does not think that there's an issue with both this project and the Festival Park project. Where's this project? It's at 30% design, just like the parking facility. Next steps, let's start final design. As soon as we can get funding to move forward with a specific phase, the promenade is ready to go. Some potential funding sources here. Again, community project funding, that federal appropriations process. USDOT build, which actually just got released the day before Thanksgiving. The notice of funding opportunity got released for that. Because of Nacogdoches' size and whatnot, they actually are eligible for potentially for from 80 to 100% of those funds. And certain set-asides are available for communities of Nacogdoches' size as well. So that's a potential funding opportunity. Again, the Economic Development Administration is a potential funding opportunity. The TxDOT Transportation Alternatives Program is also an opportunity for here, as well as a couple of TPWD opportunities. Implementation. This can be a very quick implementable project. So you're already at 30%. Depending on funding and the timelines needed, we could go all the way from 30 to 90 to then 100%, depending on permitting and whatnot. So this can move very fast through the design phase and then start with construction, and it can be constructed within a year. And that includes all the landscaping as well. So moving on to Festival Park, which is, make sure I get this correct, your things. It is 64, 65, and 66 in your report. And this is very much more of a long-term, large project. So this would be a complete rethink of Festival Park, with the main focal point being an amphitheater with a covered structure as well as tiered seating and then an open expansive lawn. When we did the community survey, people said that activating Festival Park would encourage them to visit downtown more. And so how can we activate Festival Park more? Having more and more of events like an amphitheater. We're proposing a parking garage. We're proposing the amphitheater, we're proposing a stormwater pond, we're proposing a couple of other things like continuing the hike and bike trail from the Bonita Creek Promenade all the way actually to the farmers market if possible, depending on some right-of-way considerations. Realignment of Cox Street to actually, so that it, instead of going through right now, we'd actually just realign it so that it goes on the south part of Festival Park and becomes a staging area for bands using. The amphitheater, proposing a food truck park. We propose keeping the restrooms and concessionaire area the same, just kind of enhancing around it for better concessions. We're proposing pickup and drop off for like Uber and Lyft to create kind of a little like plaza area at the front. And then turning Fredonia Street into more of like a festival type street that could be closed as needed for different events and whatnot. So cost, here's the big one. The amphitheater is obviously it's gonna be the largest cost item. It's gonna be about $15 million. But that, I'm gonna also mention that includes contingencies as well, so keep that in mind. The detention pond, which I would like to note is not needed to meet the additional requirements for the project. It is more of a public amenity. So what I'm saying is the detention pond does not need to come first in order to provide your stormwater mitigation for the rest of the improvements. So keep that in mind. There's the trail, better playground, street improvements, the food truck park, and restrooms and concessionaires. So all total, concluding design and contingency for each element, you're looking at potentially $50 million. It's a lot, but we think visionary, long-term, this is a potential option for you guys. The idea of an amphitheater there is not new. It goes back decades. But what does it look like, and where's the demand now? And it seems like there is demand for a structure that can hold between 3,000 to 5,000 people, because you don't really have that venue opportunity yet in Nacogdoches.
And Elizabeth, so she's mentioned the letter of no impact from the Corps as one, and they called this out as well. So without having to make any improvements to any of the actual drainage way through there, this would be dressing it up probably. I mean, that's going full, basically mini Woodlands amphitheater at that point. I would assume even when you're looking at the stage and the seating, that would probably even get you some shade structure, I would
Yes.
assume at that. See, that's even getting into some cover. As you get deeper into design, obviously some of those costs can get refined or even come down in terms of that contingency. But I think the other piece is, and we've talked about this as a next phase, would be probably utilizing hotel motel funds to do a deeper dive on current demand. Because you've got underutilized facilities as well, in that you've got the stadium, you've got the arena, you've got the expo. However, none of that also activates downtown. So that's another thing to remember. So the question is, and again, once you start looking at something like this wouldn't necessarily be something to be bid off all entirely by the city. Keep in mind, you have some other philanthropic options out there. Not that they would throw anything around here, work with others that are already here, but just keep in mind, the Moody's Foundation did $100 million for Moody Center in Austin. A lot of these are usually done with some form of long-term naming rights as well attached to them. So there's a couple of options. But the demand analysis for hotel motel, just in terms of the size of shows, where the gaps are, and what time of year. And then also when you have your dips, and obviously in the summer, which would make a lot of sense for, let's say, on campus at SFA indoors, you have obviously a lot more hotel capacity. But I think we did see with the last rig down, this is already basically at capacity downtown, unless you have both structured parking and more structure to Festival Park. Otherwise, you kind of have semi-organized chaos. And it's also difficult at that, under the current configuration, to really manage it without a whole lot of PD and Public Works and others, because you're having to set up fencing or you're having to set up barricades, and this would include a lot of the prerequisite things you would need for a more fixed structure, more method, less madness. So that's what that's for.
Yeah, to add to Rick's point, several of the project elements are public safety elements. So you're spending the capital funds now, but can save on additional operations like additional barricades, additional public security, because we're proposing all of that and they can just go in and be mitigation for public safety. The other thing I want to note is that each of these items can be implemented independently. You don't need to do them all together. You don't need to co-locate any of them. You can build the amphitheater, you can do the detention pond, the playground, or the hike and bike trail all independently. And so that really actually helps you with your funding because you can target your funding for each of the elements versus trying to go to someone and say, hey, I need $50 million to do this. That is probably not going to be well received. So, but these have different elements and each can be structured as their own separate sub-project, which really helps you, one, get some additional funding, but then help with the implementation so people can show you're actually making progress versus holding everything and trying to do everything all at once. So incremental improvements help actually get additional funding. And then moving on to the last project, which was a review of the public buildings in downtown. So if you look at page 84 and 85 of your report. So for this, we did things a little bit differently. A lot of these buildings are already in place. So what we wanted to do was to figure out what are potential buildings that could be something else. You have a lot of historic buildings here in Nacogdoches. But they all a lot of them have a use already. That's the use that they want to be and is a good use for them at the moment. So, but which buildings could potentially be a higher and better use in a way that is a net benefit to the city? So what we did was we looked at all of the buildings in downtown, narrowed it down to which ones were public-owned buildings, and then which ones were like historically preserved. Got it down to a pretty small list, and then evaluated each of those buildings for what we thought would be potential for conversion into something else. And we resulted in 4 buildings really that we're recommending to consider for a potential transfer of use and potential transfer out of their either current ownership or create some sort of public-private partnership. One of them is City Hall. This building used to be a hotel. So could it be a hotel in the future? The building next door is the Bright Foundation building. That building is technically registered as a public building. So, but when you combine this building and that building, you have a substantial amount of square footage, which then opens up different development opportunities. And then the other one is the fire station as well as the fire administration building. Those are moving nearby. So what do you do with the building moving forward? So just kind of keeping that in mind, you've got 3 buildings that are mostly contiguous. There's just one building in between. So is there a use for, like one use for all 3 of these buildings, or is it going to be 3 separate uses? And that's kind of your next step, is to figure out what exactly, and that requires a lot of engagement with the developer community. But something to consider is, these are old buildings. It is expensive to renovate them. Something to think about, though, is depending on what the use is, you could renovate them for potentially $150 a square foot to $400 a square foot, depending on the use. A hotel is expensive to build. That's just how it is. But if you're modifying the use just slightly and just upgrading things, you potentially could get it for about $150 a square foot. It really just depends on what that property owner or the city really wants to see in that building. But look, why exactly do this? I think the key thing here is this is valuable property within the city of Nacogdoches. And if it could be a higher and better use, that is a lot of additional taxable value and additional revenue within the city that could then be invested into other projects and places within the city.
And Elizabeth, and with that, all of these buildings that would potentially be in play can't go to that highest and best use without the garage structure. And because not only is it pulled up the hill, it's more proximate to serve parking need here, And then that also goes back to what level of investment per foot and what use. So if there is an event venue and more frequency of events, then you would likely have probably, a hotel would probably benefit from that. Restaurants would benefit from that. So they all kind of, one more big word I can't use, symbiotically feed off of each other. Are you thinking Remora or something? I don't know. Anyway,
I'm not commenting tonight
so something more
on
parasitic.
your word use.
More parasitic. So, but that really, these buildings can't be fully activated without the parking component, because we're already at peak demand. And once the Elliott Building is activated, that alone, as you already see when you come downtown to park, it'll be a competition without it.
Yep, all that is correct. So just a couple of other things that we did as part of our work was we did a retail demand analysis, really trying to think about what could go in these buildings. Hotel or mixed-use space really is like the key things. You have a lot of retail spaces here. Are they the exact size and up to date as some of the retail required? No, but it can't be done in probably fairly inexpensive manner. But most likely, the best uses for these would be a hotel or mixed use, such as a restaurant or a coffee shop. Something to keep in mind. Right now, there might not be a demand for another restaurant in downtown, but once Elliott Electric relocates all of their employees here, or if there is another sizable office relocation or like a hotel here, there's going to be additional demand for restaurants within the area. So then where can they go? And these buildings would be a potential opportunity for that. The growth at SFA, skyrocketing enrollments for this semester. Well, where do those students and their parents go when they're coming to visit campus? They need to have places to go. And so increased enrollment and investment at SFA will also increase demand for different uses within the downtown area. So just thinking about some funding sources here. Obviously, private buildings going to probably require a lot of private investment, but there are a couple of funding sources to consider here from a public perspective. Historic tax credits are one, but these are for private developers to utilize themselves. And then a couple of additional things would be the EDA does have some funding opportunities available for like utility upgrades. So the utilities that serve City Hall, probably not the size of the utility capacity you would need to serve, say, a hotel. So those capacity upgrades could be funded through grant funding from the Economic Development Administration. Summing all of this up. There we go. So our work completed to date was all the different meetings that we had. We already applied for one grant application. We are working on a second one, which is the next item on the agenda. We did a lot of public engagement, a lot of project development, final report refining, and then presenting to you here today. And so what's next? Just thinking about it, centralized parking facility, letter of intent with the property owner. Pursue grant funding, work to establish your P3 structure for what does this look like on this site as a privately owned facility. Bonita Creek Promenade, pursue grant funding so you can start that final design phase and really get that moving along. Continue the coordination with Union Pacific regarding potentially public right-of-way along the creek, as well as obtaining that letter of no impact from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. For Festival Park, also pursue grant funding for the various project elements. You can pursue grant funding for one project element or multiple, really depending on what the City Council would like to do. Also obtain that letter of no impact from the Army Corps. And then for the public buildings, consider how you would potentially set up a transparent process for the disposal of public property. And all of that is in the report for like what a potential process.
And I did want to say that they could have brought this report in October, but we wanted them to further refine. And keep in mind, you had the shutdown, You had the EDA called, and you actually had nobody at EDA. And we were also asked by members of the committee to look at other costs in terms of garage costs, which we still don't have. In terms of what they have are actually what were federally funded projects built in the last few years, some of which are COVID. So I want to make it real clear that we slowed them down to bring this when we brought it. They were, all their work on the project had proceeded. And what the result is, though, you have things that are this close to either being ready to submit, which is your next item, or, for that matter, move forward with other project funding. And in this, since that time, we've also had the award of a project with TxDOT on North Street. So all of this will ultimately come together, which is, the timing is good. It's good that the shutdown's obviously behind us as well, and Elizabeth can also speak to the submittal schedule, which at this point, one thing we did want to do with the committee, we wanted them to be comfortable with the numbers. However, I still do believe some of the folks in the private sector, okay, we can do it for cheaper. We still haven't seen those itemized costs. And so I think we're safe to go ahead and submit with a higher number. I'd rather go higher than end up with lower. But what we really do want to do is work with all the parties that if some of the private elements could be done in advance, that we basically call out the items that could be submitted, even if it takes going through another appropriations process. So identifying the federally eligible pieces that could be phased, even an additional floor towards the end, elevator shaft, things like that. So these, you can have everything. There's an old saying, you can have it fast and you can have it cheap. And you can have it right, but you can't have all three. Pick two. It doesn't work any other way. I don't know how else to say it. So I'll leave it at that.
So, this is, as Rick said, so the content in the report is being presented to you guys. We'd like to refine a couple of the pictures and the graphics before it's fully published on y'all's website. But this is all of the content in the report. It's also structured so that if you were to pursue additional grant funding, you can use the information in here. So this is the report. There's also several appendices that are being finalized and referenced in the report. So there's about a half dozen or so appendices. And it just contains a lot of the information that you would put in a grant application. So a lot of it is here already, and you just need to essentially modify it for whenever a notice of funding opportunity comes out. So you already have the bulk of a future grant application for every one of these projects. Happy to take any questions you guys have.
I have several, but I don't want to.
Go ahead.
Okay. So first, I just wanted to say that, Rick, I appreciate your vision in this and thinking about the whole downtown and, you know, how to actually bring dollars in and how to find other dollars than the ones. And I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to say, so I actually read the whole thing.
Oh, great.
So beforehand. And I was really impressed. It is practical and thorough, and you analyze the barriers, including the federal requirements and even the flooding and the waterways of the U.S. and all that. And the fact that you're recommending funding and that also you're ready for funding, it was impressive, particularly if we saw the last plan. I mean, this was really very, very helpful. But I do have a lot of questions, so several of them. And the first thing is are we, on timeframes, are we already assuming we're approving this, or is there, I would like to have some opportunity for public input, for the public to see this proposal and to have some kind of, be able to read it and, you know, have some feedback for it. Rick, that may be your question, or?
I guess as the one that assumes representative democracy after a certain amount of public input.
That's correct.
They've sought public input on the general concepts. This fleshes out the details and is intended to move forward with those. It's really four primary project areas. So that's, again, that's why y'all get the big bucks. So we can move forward on pursuing funding and the things for those implementation details. That doesn't mean, though, that there would not be additional opportunities for public comment as you move forward with these pieces. So, for example, and I'll just use this as another one just because it's out ahead. We have the active project funding from TxDOT. There will be a series of public meetings for what the potential streetscape may look like as your, view corridor. Is it historic style lighting like we have downtown? Is there a landscaping strip? And if TxDOT also brings to bear with that project some additional planning funds for driveway consolidation or turning movements. So let's just say, should you move forward on the, let's just say the EDA grant. Now, let's say we get an award. We would go through a process in terms of some of the input on the garage. Obviously, with some limitations, you have a public-private partnership potentially on that. So there would be plenty of other phased opportunity for public input.
I know you want to say something, but how about if, is there, I know we have this, I guess it's a really close to a final draft. And if we can make that public on our
But
website.
It would be on the website.
Okay, and then maybe make some announcements that people can now look at it and they could give us feedback or they could have, I'm not sure, but I would like the public to be able to see this at this point. And
It
be
is on the website.
Right, but be able to respond and ask questions and think it through and answer questions that we could have for them, if that's, you're just saying that it'll be an
I'm a man of
informal
action.
process.
I'll just leave it at that. We've got input.
Yeah,
Y'all want to get something done. You had the other plan that didn't get done.
yeah.
We
Right,
have-
right.
we-
I'm not,
we have bogged this thing.
We're at a next, let me say this, we're at a nexus with potential opportunities at the federal level, with local partners. We tried to take all of the prior information that was out there,
right.
some of which was useful from the prior plan, the public input, even the plan from 20 years ago. I realize it's a chicken and egg,
it is.
but at a point, there's a decision point to then say, okay, pursue these. That's really what we're asking. At this point, there's been some analysis. Would I want to move to a phase to quibble over back and forth? I don't enjoy quibbling over math with anybody. We've got some options, or we can filibuster this and end up like the last one. And I don't know how else to say it.
That's the last thing that I want to do, is that this has been going on and going on and going on and going on, and it's time to make a decision and move forward.
But I'm not
That's my
saying, but I'm
opinion.
not saying if there's elements to talk about here in this that y'all happy to answer any questions. We already have it out there. Elizabeth, y'all had input, you had 700 some odd.
Yep.
You had almost as many, or did you have more actual responses than the SFA master plan?
Oh, I wouldn't want to talk to SFA.
I think we,
but we
and there
have-
were overlapping, the one thing that was an overlap between the two processes was more stuff to do downtown, and it did mention concerts, and it did mention farmer's market. And so we're also trying to tie the farmer's market to the promenade. Would we call it a promenade, like lemonade here? But however you'd like us to say it for theatrical effect.
Yeah, and I will just add, when we're talking about planning and being practical, it is a continual conversation. And so, especially if you're obtaining federal funding, there is a requirement for that continual conversation. I happened to have a conversation with USDOT back in October, specifically on public engagement and how to reference that in grant applications. And they were very clear, it is not only what you've done to get here, but it's also what you are proposing to do in the future. And so that is always something that it's got to just be a continual conversation thread in order to obtain your projects.
So when each project, let's say we were awarded money, EDA, or you're awarded money through TxDOT on the trail program, there would be additional public meetings that would come with each of those phases in the details. Now, again, this pro forma is looking at trying to maximize either governmental or private parties or philanthropic financing for the majority of everything. Doesn't mean there isn't something in there we wouldn't have to match at some point. But it is not proposing going down the road of bonding or backing general fund, backing bonds, you know, with general revenue for a facility, but, you know, at Festival Park or the garage. I've seen those kind of proposals. I've steered actually more than one city away from those before. This is looking at the low-hanging fruit, where we're at with SFA and UT growth, where we're at as a city, and where we're at also with the opportunity with Elliott downtown, chipping away literally at the building in real time.
There's 4 words for me. Public-private. I love that because that's what we have to have. We have to have a stake in it. People do. And I love the words immediate results because really we have sat on this for, at least on my time, 4 years. I think it's time to move on it.
It's really been longer than that because it was going on before you and I got on the council, you know.
Well, let me,
And then that was a fiasco.
the only thing I will say, there's enough old documentation that indicates this has actually been going on for more than 2 decades.
I think people would love to see something done.
Done, yeah.
Finally, you know, and we can just beat this horse forever if we want to.
Well,
but
we
I
never
think-
will get anything done. Do we have to have a motion for this?
I have some more questions.
Well, I know you do, but I just asked my question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, all right.
It just,
you
that's
just
not
go ahead.
approve
You go
everything,
ahead.
that's accept the report too.
Another
Do-
So-
question for the city attorney. None of this binds us to anything, right?
Right,
Oh.
right.
We're accepting a report. There's nothing controversial here. We're talking about how we like the level of detail that's in the report, that it gives us clear guidance on a way to proceed, not on, hey, you have to do this right now. But I'll echo Councilman Mall, immediate results, public-private partnerships. I don't think you could have hit it more on
Well,
the head than that.
and let me say this, the next item, that's why the next time, so we would bring a series of next items, and the next item on the agenda would be the next step with EDA on the garage. So we would bring a series of those as opportunities come up.
And I will say, this, I've been around 1 year longer than you guys, and you're right, that we have sat around and let's call it what it is, the other plan was shelved, right? It was put on the shelf. Whether you like what was the content of it or not, we included the content in the analysis that the Goodman Corporation did. This gives us guidance on what we should do going forward. Is it perfect? I don't think any of us are striving for perfection. We're striving for getting things done. And I think that's sort of been the hallmark of what this council has done over the past 2 years, is that we've moved the ball forward and we're moving toward our goals of economic development and improvement in the city.
Okay, I'll continue my questions. Just to be clear, I'm not asking for I wasn't asking for huge amounts of another year of input or anything like that, but I'll do my own, making sure that at least people who I think will like to read it and might have some input, that they have the opportunity. So my first question's about the parking garage. And I know we're going to get to this in the next one, but I'm really confused about whether it's going to be 2-level, 3-level, whether it's on private property. So, you know, I think a lot has to do with what the Elliott Corporation, Elliott Electric wants to do. And I know we have such a short time. My understanding is we have a really short time frame because they would like to move into the building. Can you clarify any of that for me?
I do, well, I'm gonna, did you want to say something, Mike, or did you just move? No, I can talk on that. Well, Mike can, but let me just say, 7A on executive session is related to that. That is one of the other steps. So that's looking at your, whatever agreement.
So you
your letter
think
of
we
intent.
can, I'm just going to ask in general, you think we can do it all, get a 3-level and meet the requirements?
I think that we can do a phased project that meets all of the current reality between their schedule, federal funding availability or not, or to preserve opportunities for federal funding availability may take a year or two more. Don't know. Obviously, you've got a lot of things in flux. Again, you had the shutdown. If you go back to what the last appropriations cycle was like, it basically just took the things from the prior. But what our goal would be is to, like, I don't know what else you do with cake other than eat it, would be to work with Elliott. So if they moved forward on parts of the garage for their purpose, we wouldn't hold them up, and we would still pursue federal funding for the full ultimate footprint and height and total capacity for that delta.
And Rick does talk about the flexibility that we're sort of building into our approach. Robert Flores, representing Elliott Electric, was a part of our downtown technical advisory committee. We had discussed among the committee about how we might approach this in terms of our applications for federal funding, their timeline, and certainly a top priority is going to be their timeline. If they're committed to partnering with us on a parking facility, maybe it's not 3 levels if the funding doesn't match that. But we build it in a way that 3 levels can be done at some point in the future. So what we are doing is trying to meet both goals here, the goal of getting funding without burdening our taxpayers and also meeting Elliott's timeline so that they can do what they need to do to grow their business.
And what will happen if it's only 2 levels? Just out of curiosity.
Then it's only 2 levels?
Yeah, but I mean, how much will that,
Now, okay, speaking to that, and they've done analysis, and again, it also comes back to the highest and best use and the square footage. You would have some limitations, you wouldn't have as much overflow. But Elizabeth, I know we've talked about, if it's 200 versus basically 320 or something like that, so I'd let you speak to that.
Yeah, so if you just do a couple stories, obviously you're not getting the full amount needed for the full vision for downtown Nacogdoches' growth. But you are getting, if you just do 2 levels, you get what is existing plus some additional. So in the final design, once you understand how you're doing the different phasing, 2 or 3 levels would give you the exact delta for the parking spots, but you're looking at least an additional 30 to 50, depending on how you align the different ramps and whatnot, so.
and we wouldn't have the retail space if
You
it's
could,
2
you still could.
levels?
It just depend on community input, desires from the various parties.
So what it might mean is if you're having an event or something at Festival Park, you do not have as much capacity parking-wise proximate for your largest scenario events, but you would have definitely more than you have. And also, again, for downtown proper, by pulling it up the hill, it puts it much closer to downtown proper in the center of downtown versus doing what everybody's grandpa did, uphill both directions in the snow to school. If you had to park, if it's all a flat surface lot.
And like you said, you could still when you build it, if it's two floors, you could still potentially add a third floor to it.
If we plan, so we do have some, again, we have some remaining ARPA. There may be another way to cut at it, even with working with Elliott Electric. Part of it would be, do you build the superstructure and the supports in so it can accept a prefab dropped-in third floor and plan for that in the final design?
Yep, so those would all be things, when we talk about like from a practical perspective, you're really thinking, okay, well, this is what we can do right now, but we know in 5-10 years, we're going to need more. Here is how we can actually address that with precast concrete and put something in this prefab. So there's ways to play with that, but if you go into it with that mindset through the design phase and factor in what would that look like from a structural perspective, you can prepare for that eventuality.
Okay. I know you all are, I know everybody is working very hard to try and get this done and to have as much, to have as much potential and to help the city out. But, so on Festival Park, I was confused about the fields. Are we still going to have some kind of fields or partnering with SFA, or it didn't mention anything?
So we are not proposing any sort of sports facility here, for a couple of reasons. One, when we look at the site and building in the floodplain, makes it much harder to have a sports facility. Also, the size constraints really limits what you can do. We did an analysis looking at different types of college fields, minor league baseball fields, and it just, especially with the slope, just doesn't, it's just not conducive, and we want to put in something that's more practical and can be done. We don't think a sports facility is the most applicable here. An amphitheater, though, is, and it's been, that idea has been around, so we're really leveraging what had already been discussed.
And you have to remember, SFA went through its master plan process
Absolutely.
at the same time, which is why we included Michael McBroom on the committee as well. And they've made the decision internally to, and with their input, to do their fields on campus. And the other thing is, I know they want to activate their campus for more student activity. We want to activate downtown. And, would that be the highest and best use? I don't know if baseball would downtown. I think it's great we landed the minor league team. But, again, that's why we would propose, before getting deeper into this facility discussion, to do probably a $40,000, $50,000 hotel motel funded study, which would look at the demand and look at our hotel gaps downtown. That would look if we have gaps or if we have space. And then if those 2 weeks during the year that we have great weather, if it's worth the capital investment to build something, or if we would be better served by working with the UT system and their connections back to Moody Center and going back to the 80s and 70s and just trying to get the Coliseum and the Expo more frequently booked, especially in shoulder months when we're at a low point on hotel stays.
Okay. The last I'd heard, there was discussions of fields, so I just wanted to clarify that. As far as the trails and the, I saw the funding sources are mostly economic development and all the other ones. I think the last trails were funded through some health opportunities. Are we thinking about that? Particularly
Yes.
rural health, and I'm thinking of ORHP, NOFAs, and things like that. Are we going
Yes.
beyond?
Unfortunately, a lot of health funding has been cut back for these types of projects. Some of it is still available. It's just cut back a lot. The CDC used to fund several projects like this, and unfortunately, really since 2018, 2019, they've really limited that. But what we do in the applications, though, is emphasize the health benefits, which then opens up some additional funding. So, in fact, the TxDOT Transportation Alternatives Program, you need to talk about the health benefits in those applications. Unfortunately, it's just a limited amount of health related funding. There's some private philanthropic funding that does some stuff, but it would not be enough to fund the projects.
Yeah, I was just curious about that, why, because that funded so much.
It did, yeah.
I had, this is my last question. So if you were a betting woman, or you, Rick, let me ask you, what do you think are the probabilities that we're going to be getting, that we'll be able to do all these things?
If I were a betting woman,
Yeah, if you were betting whoever.
that's one ugly
We
woman.
won't get into that whole discussion.
I think, and I'll be honest,
Yeah,
I think that, we're getting good traction with TxDOT on some of the calls for projects. I think the delegation, even at the federal level, understands that this will be our priority. I've even explained it to our friends in the I-69 coalition that, yes, we support going after I-69 money for TxDOT, but not at the cost of bringing federal money to Nacogdoches proper. And I do think we've got a good working relationship with both our federal and state delegation, and that it may take more than one swing of the axe, wink, wink. But I think we have a good, it's not Dumb and Dumber, it's more than 1% chance. I think we have a good probability of getting some funding and complementing what Elliot's doing, which we're very grateful and that private sector catalyst, without that piece, because at the end of the day, if you don't have the jobs and you don't have the daytime population, then you really can't support the restaurant side, you can't support the hotel side, and all of it has to work together. And our goal with this was not perfection, but it was trying to make us, within a reasonable cost, the best we can be with what we have. Are you going to end up with a waterway like Natchitoches? Probably not. But you beat them in football, and we can clean that up back there. And I think that that's what it goes back to. There's other cities that aren't any bigger than us that have amphitheaters. There's a lot of private and philanthropic and naming right type opportunities out there. Everybody that was anybody used to play coming through. Y'all probably remember coming through town. You probably name them. There's no reason we shouldn't be back on that radar. And I think that the SFA master plan and this plan kind of, you can feel that there needs to be more to do here. And Elizabeth hit on it. I think Ashley's hit on it. Downtown is underutilized. It needs to have more to it and still remain what it is. And what we tried to propose was leveraging what we have as assets without leveraging the taxpayers' pocket at the same time. So, is it a perfect plan? I think it's a very good plan. I'll leave it at that. I do think it's a very good plan and very implementable.
and you might have other private partners that, will want to play, and that might shift some things around too.
And by the way, I think part of it being out on the website
Yeah,
is not just people's opinions, but also generating additional interest from the private sector
exactly.
on us moving forward and bringing more dollars and capturing those dollars here to the benefit of the citizens.
Exactly. That's one of the reasons that I hope to have public. Let me ask one other thing, since I didn't get your answer on the percentages of if you're a betting person, but I don't know, unless you want to refine that.
I had a great-grandfather that raised greyhounds, so I try not to gamble. But I'll leave it at that. I
Okay,
think it's better than 50%.
good.
I'll say that. It's better.
Okay, so I have a little tiny question. The historic credits, I know that was really disappointing to Mr. Elliott and to everybody that they couldn't get any historic credits. Is there a way to maybe, I don't know if this is asking more than what we have the capacity to do, but to just, I don't know if any of the buildings we're looking at, like this building or any of the other ones you're talking about
Yeah,
repurposing.
this block and we've talked all through this internally and working on the plan. This block all qualifies.
It all qualifies,
we-
okay.
It's now their building, because of the
Right.
changes and how it was cobbled together, that was a different animal.
I think that might be helpful to include even in this report to say these buildings, so that people know that they're, and I know there's all kinds of problems. It's sometimes more expensive to get the historic credits than it is to not get them.
And how
as
long you
do.
hold it and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah, we did, that was one of our qualifying evaluation metrics, is it eligible for historic tax credits? And so if it was not, it got
Okay, okay.
cut through our
And
review.
will Goodman then be, will we keep working with Goodman to then make these grant proposals, or how will we, are these,
I know we've ran this meter.
Answer the no for
where
this?
We've actually tried to get them to refine a lot of this, probably, I'd say above and beyond their scope even, using their time. I think there'd be an opportunity after, we could revisit after we get in this current submittal in, probably some opportunity to work with them on an ongoing basis for, let's say, that project, pending, either approval of said funding on the federal side, or trying to protect those potentially reimbursable components and working with Elliott to do that. So some of that might be through us, or it might actually be through Elliott or hybrid. So as we're looking at breaking down those components, working with Elliott, I think we'll be able to answer that. And then, of course, if y'all wanted us to bring back to you an ongoing, pursuit of federal funding discussion with Goodman, I think they could even, I'm sure they could also put in potentially for even the project on North that we're working, going to work to scope with an RFQ or an RFP with TxDOT. I don't know if that'll run through TxDOT or us. And so either way.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges is to understand which opportunities are out there and which ones fit, because you could spend your whole life just sitting in there, looking at grants.gov and.
Well, we identified
many
that one and
times.
did that one. We didn't use y'all on that one, Elizabeth. We did that.
The text
We did
dot
that
is
in-house.
internal. Yep.
Good, good.
In-house. So
And that's another thing that I think we all really appreciate, this administration's pursuit of outside grant dollars. That's really very, very helpful. So
or as
thank
Brad
you.
was looking at me and say, the relentless pursuit of nonsensical. Yeah.
Thank you for answering all my questions.
Of course, no. So say, when my first classes in college, way back ago, the professor stood up and said, "We're not letting perfect be the enemy of the
That's
good."
right. That's
And
correct.
so, because what's perfect to someone is not necessarily perfect to someone else. And so, what is here is very customizable and implementable, depending on what funding sources are really available and where the community would like to go.
And very good.
Any other questions?
Just one on my end.
Of course.
When can we expect to see the appendices?
Next week. I just wanted to make sure I presented to you guys first before we got all that correct.
Do you want any little typo feedback or anything?
Oh, if you find something, please let me know so I can make sure that that's correct.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yes.
I have a couple little ones.
Please let me know.
I was gonna answer Chad and say, when I have it removed, I'll send it to you.
You have more than one?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion, please. Can I? Mr. Attorney, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the Downtown Projects and Implementation Strategy Final Report from the Goodman Corporation.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, next item, item 6B, consider approval of the Resolution 1404-12-25 regarding the submission of a fiscal 2025 disaster supplemental grant program application by the City of Nacogdoches to the Economic Development Administration for federal funding assistance to construct a parking facility in the downtown area of Nacogdoches.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So in July, in the middle of our development of this report, Economic Development Administration, Federal Administration released their disaster supplemental notice of funding opportunity for essentially for 2023, 2024 disasters, declared disasters. I'll touch on the one specifically applicable here, but nationally, they're going to award on average anywhere from 2 to 20 million per construction project. We're looking at a construction project in particular for this one. About 1.5 billion total. It's a large amount of money, but it's very competitive, extremely competitive. In Texas, we did consult at least a couple of times, and Elizabeth participated with us on this, with an EDA staff person to try and assess, you know, what we're proposing. Is this something that EDA will consider? Is this something that could be potentially competitive? And then what should we realistically expect as in terms of an award? They did mention to us that in Texas, in our area, with all the disasters across the country that EDA is potentially evaluating, it's really up to about $5 million per project that they would target. And that's, in their perspective, in their communication with us, they said, well, that's realistic to expect. Goodman Corporation is recommending, as you can read in the report, that we seek funding for the proposed downtown parking facility. We seek EDA funding. This won't be probably the only opportunity we will seek, depending on what we're awarded. If we're awarded, we'll look at every opportunity available to us. This is simply one that we feel like we can pursue right now, so we're going to do it as quickly as we can because it is competitive. Some of the items, there's certain federal forms, economic impact forms, narratives that will be provided. Much, if not all, of the downtown report already checks those boxes. We simply need a council resolution to put a bow on that. We will also, we're engaging our federal and state representatives, as Rick had mentioned, on providing their support to that as we need it. If we need it, we'll include that as well. What you can't see on your screen, but what I'm showing here is the disaster this is applicable to is Hurricane Beryl. It affected us with downed trees, with downed power, a number of ways, but maybe more so in some other counties, so it may be more competitive if those other areas are applying for the funding. But much of East Texas, especially in our Deep East Texas region, was affected and would be eligible under this funding opportunity.
And Mike, one thing I would add is part of our, and you may have it on there, part of our pro forma and also working with Goodman and then looking at the site to pull up that garage out of the floodplain and also the impervious covering the balance of that. So
Mitigate? Is that
yeah,
what you're-
that. So with the goal to decelerate, not accelerate any more water down towards the creek. Now, granted, of course, you'd also have the pedestrian improvements, but you know that's at a flat grade. So we did talk through that with EDA prior to the shutdown, and I think that there was definitely some interest in the ability to kind of do some mitigation. And then the general, obviously it's Economic Development Administration, so the fact that it does tie back to additional downtown full-time jobs as well. And I believe that this part of town also falls in an enterprise zone as well, so there's, believe it does. So there's probably a couple of angles on this that will be of public benefit.
So, and Rick mentioned one of the, I guess, the recovery goals that EDA charges, and this is shared on their website as goals for their consideration of these projects. Restoration of economic activity. So if we're able to mitigate floodplain and provide development that supports economic activity, hey, double thumbs up. They find that attractive. It also would result in economic growth that exceeds pre-disaster baseline conditions. We showed you, we presented to you, and it's in the report about the parking capacity if we can improve that parking capacity with the structure, mitigate any of the other obstacles and elements, and not be create a problem in other areas. We've talked to you about the Army Corps, consulting with them on any potential negative effects by any development in that area. Hey, that's another win. So we're meeting EDA's goals with this project. There are other EDA-funded projects that include parking structures, some related to downtown, others related to other projects. So this is not setting a unique precedent. This is something that's very following of the formula for these types of grant applications. What are our goals? Our goal is to request about $14.9 million from the EDA in this application. That is the 80% mark. That would be the 80% for the full funding of about 18.7 that you have in your report minus contingencies. So we are asking for the 80%. Again, I shared with you what the realistic goal would be. We're going to ask for it because that's what we need. We'll plan for what we get, and we have a plan for that. So we're going to ask for the $14.9 million. That's what we need. We are working with Elliott Electric on partnership. That is something you'll see at the end of this agenda. And then we plan to submit this before the end of the calendar year. We're bringing it to you now. We're going to wrap everything up and get it done, get that out the door, and work on the next one. Whatever the next actions are related to this, we'll keep the council and the public updated on what goals we're accomplishing, milestones we're hitting. Certainly our next phase would be to really identify what that design might look like realistically in order to meet Elliott's goals in particular. So what can we move out the door now? What funding can we apply now that we either have or can obtain to get the project moving, not just sit on it? I'll take any questions on the resolution.
Any questions?
I have a little one. I didn't read the NOFA or anything, but is this, do we have an advantage by being rural or non-metro, or is this specific to, or not? Just curious.
Not as much as some other ones, but we are within an identified disaster declaration region. Our region's status socioeconomically does give us a slight advantage, although it's not as much as some other opportunities where it's absolutely part of the application process.
Okay, thanks. Do you want a motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Great. Okay, I will move that we approve Resolution 1404-12-25 as stated in item 6B.
We have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
And thank you, by the way, for doing this. Thank you for
Thank you,
being
Council.
on top of it and getting all these out.
That concludes this evening's meeting. It is 6:42. Pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.072 and 551.074, we will adjourn into executive session. Thank you very much for coming. Returning from executive session at 7:38, and okay,
Sections.
yeah. Pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.072 and 551.074.
Mayor, I would make a motion that we approve the letter of intent regarding the Elliott Building parking garage as presented in closed session.
Have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Item 7B, no action. And ladies and gentlemen, that concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you very much for coming, and God bless the great city of Nacogdoches, Texas.